some very interesting information. Now, I want to talk about this belief system that blocks the disgust response in people. To explain the belief system that I've been referring to, I want to do another quick exercise with you. If vegan is the term that we use to describe an individual who follows the tenets, the teachings of the belief system or ideology we call veganism, then what do we call somebody who is not a vegan or vegetarian? What are some common words that you use here that they probably translate the same? Yeah.
Carnivore.
Right. So do you say omnivore also?
Yeah.
And carnivore?
Yeah.
Okay. And I've been saying meat eater. Do you use this also? These are in English, and I think in many places in the world, these are the most common terms that we use. But let's talk for a minute about these terms. An omnivore, by definition, is an animal, human or non-human, that can ingest both flesh and plant matter. And a carnivore is an animal that needs to ingest flesh in order to survive. So both omnivore and carnivore describe one's biological predisposition, not one's ideological choice. If humans are naturally omnivorous, for example, and I know this point is debatable, then vegans would be omnivores, just as people who eat animals, right? So we're talking about physiology or biology, not ideology. And meat eater describes a behavior as though it's divorced from a belief system. This is why we don't say plant eater when we describe vegans, right? Because we recognize that the behavior of eating plants reflects a deeper ideology. We tend to assume that it's only vegans and vegetarians who bring our beliefs to the dinner table, but most people don't eat pigs, but not dogs, because they don't have a belief system when it comes to eating animals. When eating animals is not a necessity for survival, then it is a choice. And choices always stem from beliefs. And so this is why I began using the term carnism to describe the belief system that conditions people to eat certain animals. Carnism is essentially the opposite of veganism. It's an invisible ideology that I call carnism, and this is what my writing and speaking has primarily been about recently. Carnism is a dominant ideology. It's the norm. It's the meat-eating norm. This means it's invisible, it's entrenched, it shapes norms, laws, beliefs, behaviors, etc. And carnism is also a violent ideology. It's literally organized around physical violence. Meat cannot be procured without killing, and other animal products cannot be procured without causing some degree of harm to animals. And so violent dominant ideologies like carnism need to use a set of social and psychological defense mechanisms so that humane people can participate in inhumane practices without fully realizing what they are doing. In other words, this invisible ideology that is carnism, it teaches us how not to think and ultimately how not to feel. What carnism does is it blocks people's awareness of their cognitive moral dissonance. Cognitive moral dissonance is the term that psychologists, or the phrase that psychologists use to describe the internal moral discomfort that people feel when their values are not in alignment with their practices. It's the internal moral discomfort that we feel. So to give you an example of cognitive moral dissonance when it comes to eating animals, I'm going to share with you a quote from a meat eater I interviewed. I did my doctoral dissertation on the psychology of eating meat, and I interviewed meat eaters and meat cutters, butchers, and people who had raised and killed their own animals for food, and vegans and vegetarians. And I was interviewing this woman about her food choices and asking her what foods she regularly eats. And when I got down my list and I asked her about eating meat, this was what she answered me. I mean, there are so many mortifying things in our culture and society, but killing animals for food certainly is one of the worst, and people ignore it the most because they think that animals don't matter. I feel a lot for these animals. Just the thought is really upsetting. And she started to cry when she talked to me, and then she looked at me and she said, "I'm crying." She's a meat eater. So when we feel cognitive moral dissonance, which we all experience, unless you're Gandhi, or, I mean, if you don't experience this, talk to me after because I want to interview you. We all experience it. Nobody lives perfectly in alignment with their values all the time, including Gandhi. It's an uncomfortable feeling, so we seek to alleviate this discomfort. And we alleviate our moral discomfort by doing one of three things. And you all know the answer to this. What do you do? What do you think people do, meat eaters or ourselves, to alleviate the moral discomfort?
We rationalize.
We can rationalize. That's right. And that will be our third option. What else?
Excuses.
We use excuses, similar. What else? What if we don't want to rationalize or use excuses? What if we want to get rid of it for real? We can block it out. Oh, you're good. You're all just so psychologically minded here. What if we don't want to play psychological games? What do we do? What did you do to alleviate your moral discomfort with eating animals? You can change your behaviors, right? We have to get in alignment somehow. We can change our values. People can say, for example, well, you know, I know that animals suffer, but I'm just a bad person. I'm selfish, I don't care about animals, and I'm just not a good person. Most people are not going to change their core values. We found this through research. I don't know why we needed to research it, but we did. And most people need to think of themselves as living a moral life. We all need to. Or, as you pointed out, we can change our behaviors. We can go vegan. As you know, often, this isn't what happens. The third option is the option that you all have been talking about, which is to change our perception of our behaviors so that it looks like our behaviors and our values are more in alignment. And it's around this third option that Carnism is organized.